Hey, it's John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and it's The Entrepreneurial You, the show for dedicated and passionate Caribbean entrepreneurs seeking daily inspiration, brought to you by author, speaker, and award-winning entrepreneur Heneka Watkis-Porter. You must be prepared to ignite.
I really think that it's time for people to think differently about success and respectability in business. I think for so long, the only value that really has mattered to a lot of people is the size of your bank account or the size of your paycheck or the size of your home or how nice of a car you have. And that stuff matters. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but I think sometimes people are prone to outsource their values to other people or to magazines or to things they see on TV and don't really understand what actually makes them happy and what makes them satisfied with their life. And I think that if people do have an opportunity to step back and think about what they actually value and where their happiness comes from, that they can find ways to orient their business to support those things. And that might not mean money. It might mean family. It might mean community. It might mean faith. It might mean independence. There's a long list of things that you can be rich with and that your business can support that I think is respectable.
Hi, this is Heneka. I'm so glad you took the time to stop by today. In Jamaican parlance, Wagwan. I'm glad to say it there. This episode is sponsored by HenekaWatkis-Porter.com as well as the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Now, on HenekaWatkis-Porter.com, you can visit us for blogs, resources, books, online podcast courses, podcasts, and more. If you are new to the Entrepreneurial You podcast, be sure to check out past episodes with guests such as John Lee Dumas, Patrice Washington, Seth Godin, Richard Branson, Amy Porterfield, and a host of other game changers.
We needed to raise capital, but our experience with local financial institutions was that they were cautious and slow to act, and interest rates were far too high. We had real concerns about financing our business through outside equity investors and the possibility of interference. Could we get a fair valuation for our business? We had our own ideas about the business and its value. Should I go the traditional route of bank financing, or should I try the Jamaica Stock Exchange? So we made a call and experienced transformation of our business through conversations. I'm John Mafood, CEO of Jamaican Teas, and we're listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Give us a call today at 876-967-3271 to begin your transformation through conversation. We want to see your company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
And now, here's today's episode. You are not your resume. You are your work. Seth Godin. Of course, I've had the pleasure of interviewing Seth on this podcast, so anything Seth, I'm all excited. All right, greetings and welcome my people former. It is episode 196 of the Entrepreneurial You podcast. I'm your host, Heneka Watkis-Porter. Today's episode is with LeFever. Lee is the co-founder of Common Craft and author of 2 books, The Art of Explanation and Big Enough. Since 2007, Common Craft has won numerous awards, worked with the world's most respected brands, and created original explainer videos that have earned over 50 million online video views. Today, Common Craft produces animated videos and digital visuals that are used by educators in over 50 countries. So, of course, all my guests are exciting and they've done interesting stuff. And Lee's, of course, different. So I'm really excited as we're about to talk about building a business that scales with your life. And of course, that's a play on the subtitle of his book, Big Enough, which we'll talk about eventually. Welcome, Lee.
Thanks for having me, Heneka.
It is my absolute pleasure. And before we dive into building a business that scales with your life, talking all about that nice jazz, I want to hear from you about anything Jamaican that you know about, whether it's the music, the food. They should have warned you here. They should have warned you that I'm going to do this, yeah?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, the first thing I think of is music. I think of food and music. I've not personally been to Jamaica. I've been to the Caribbean, but not Jamaica specifically. But there. I'm from Seattle. I lived in Seattle for 20 years. I don't live there currently, but there's a radio station called KEXP, and every Saturday morning they have a show called Positive Vibrations. That's all Jamaican music. And almost every Saturday morning we listen to it from 9 to 12, and it's our Saturday soundtrack. And it's often a lot of it's not just a bunch of Bob Marley. It's a lot of deeper cuts. And that has been a great part of my life is learning about Jamaican music through that show.
Interesting. All right. So you've you've been to the Caribbean, which we are, pretty much one, so I'm not going to hold it against you, but after this pandemic, I'm putting it out there that you need to visit Jamaica, right? I mean, you've not lived until you've been to Jamaica. Let me just flat out put it like that.
All right. I'm fully behind that.
Okay. Awesome. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's move on. Okay. So we're looking at building a business that scales with your life. Tell me about your entrepreneurial journey. At what point in your life did you recognize that you want to become an entrepreneur?
That's a good question. I was brought up in an entrepreneurial family. My parents ran a small company as I was growing up. So it was always a part of dinner table conversation, and it felt very normal to me to be a part of that in some ways. And I always thought that I would someday have my own company. It was just something that came very naturally to me. But I knew that I would have to put my time in, and I would have to be something that I worked toward. But it was in 2003 that I started Common Craft as a consulting company. And that was because I was really excited about what became social media. At the time, it was called online communities, and I had been an online community manager for a few years. And thanks a lot to my wife's encouragement and support, her keeping her job allowed me to quit the job I was at as an online community manager and found Common Craft to do consulting to help companies run online communities way back then. And that was the first time that I dipped my toe into entrepreneurial pursuits, and I loved it from day one. And the word community has become such a buzzword and almost cliched right now. So, it's interesting to know that you've started over 17 years ago, or it's just about 17 years ago. And here we are today, which of course the whole pandemic that's happening right now has given new meaning to community and all of that. Isn't it interesting? How are you finding things right now, having been around for all these many years? Yeah. Well, back then and all the way through, 2007, maybe, or a little bit later, a lot of people that were involved in online communities and social media really wanted more people to adopt it. Like more, like we could just see that like blogs are going to be huge. Social networking is going to be huge. And we believed in the positive change it could create. And I do think there has been positive change from it. But I think that we're now dealing with a lot of things in society that are rooted in those same connections. And I think that that's something that's a little bit scary, and something that is going to it's a big challenge to overcome, is what happens when everyone can have a voice online, because that's where we are right now. And I think it's balanced, like I said, there's success stories and beautiful things, but there's also some problems that come from it as well. Interesting. All right. Before we talk about even building a business, and scaling that business and all of that, and, juxtapose that to scaling alongside your lifestyle, I want to hear something, Lee, about Common Craft. Why that name? Because even when I think about Common Craft, I'm not thinking about just hearing the name. For me, it sounds very crafty, as in craft, as in arts and craft, for example. So it's interesting to hear how you came up with that name and what it is that you really do. Sure. The name is actually quite simple once you hear it. So I've always been very passionate about communication and clear communication. Like that's what online communities are. I believe the internet is a communication medium, and I believe that communication is the most common craft. It's something we all do. And I think that if you think of it as a craft, then that means that you do it with intention and you do it with purpose. And I think that's what we do in our work at Common Craft, and also what we want to help people do in their lives. So Common Craft started in 2007 when Sachi, my wife, and I started seeing that YouTube was getting bigger and that there was a lot of confusion about social media. So we started making these little videos that were about 3 minutes long and explained something like a wiki or a blog or social networking using a format with paper cutouts on a whiteboard. So there was some craft maybe in cutting out the pieces of paper that appeared in the videos, but that's not where the name came from. But in 2007, those videos, were viral hits, or the 2007 version of viral anyway. And we suddenly became known as the people who pioneered the explainer video movement. And we were being hired to make videos that explain products for companies like Google and Intel and Microsoft and Ford and Dropbox. And it just changed our lives overnight. But the real impact from it was that we suddenly have a lot of opportunity. We had a lot of ways to think about what kind of business we want to be in. And that's what over the last 12 years since those videos, we've been on sort of an experimental path of trying to understand how we can be a small company, but a scalable company that also works from home as a married couple. And that's kind of what Big Enough is about.
Interesting. You seem to be ahead of the game, Lee, because when I in 2007, I was busy thinking about starting my business, which is Pato Apparel at the time. And eventually it led me into leaving my job and going into a physical space. In retrospect, huge mistake. So while I was busy doing that, you were busy getting ahead of the game, doing all things internet and so on and stuff. Do you think that you've been in it so long that you have an advantage that perhaps, somebody who's just starting or maybe forced to because of the pandemic don't have?
I think it's one of those things that's balanced. I think that if you do anything for a long time, and Heneka, I'm sure there's things that you've done in your life for a very long time, that you kind of get stuck in your ways and you assume that the things that worked in the past will work in the future. And I think that happens to me sometimes. I might make assumptions about how things worked 5 years ago, but when you are starting something new, you come at it from a totally different perspective where you're open to all different ideas. And this relates to those first videos we made because we had no experience in making videos. We didn't go and take classes or read books. We just did what we could at the time with what we had. And I think that shows through in the videos. And one of the reasons that they were popular is we were very obviously people who were trying to figure it out. And that appealed to people. You can find those videos. If you look for wikis in plain English on YouTube, you can see one of our first videos. Okay, we shall check it out. It's interesting, as you say, that complacency will in fact step in, because I kind of feel that way about myself, even though in terms of being fully online, as a business, with somebody who is doing online marketing, podcasting and all of that since 2017. And I realize, and I mean, in the US, that's like, maybe it's just a short time ago. In Jamaica, perhaps it seemed like a long time ago, because the digital divide is as such that, we're just like waking up and like realizing, oh my gosh, we've been talking about technology all along, but we've just been talking the talk and never been walking the walk. So I find that because I have been ahead of the game, so to speak, particularly as it relates to the Jamaican landscape, that feeling of, I am already there, I know what I'm doing kind of a thing, can and will in fact does set in at times. So I get exactly what you're talking about. Now we're going to move on because we really want to get to the meat of the matter. Building a business that scales with your lifestyle. Now, before we get to that point, which is where we're going to be, basing the remainder of our conversation, I want to get from you, Lee, a sense of when you talk about scaling a business, what are you really talking about? That's a great question. I think that scaling a business often means growing. It means getting bigger in some way. For a lot of businesses, that means hiring people. For startups and often software and technology companies, it means basically separating the effort of humans from your product. And that often means thinking of things in terms of services versus products, because services require human effort. Products do not. They can multiply. So if you have, if you're a recording artist and you have a song and you own the copyright for that song can be made once and sold multiple times. So that song can scale. It can continue to make money without your personal effort being involved. So I think if you think of a song like that, then that also can apply to businesses. And in our case at Common Craft, we discovered that videos, like videos that explain subjects and solve a problem, can scale because we can make them once and sell them multiple times.
Mm-hmm. And you're just such a perfect interviewee, because that's exactly what I was about to ask you. How do you relate it to Common Craft?
Yeah, sure. So we, as I said before, we had a lot of opportunity in 2007 and 2008 because we were the first movers. And we quickly saw that we could make custom videos. We could be hired to make custom videos. And that was a very productive business for us. But we took a step back and said, you know what? We're not going to go in the normal path. We're not going to hire people. In fact, we set constraints on our company that we would always be a 2-person work from home company. We would never have employees. And so that really limited how the business could grow, because if we're going to take on more and more clients, we would need more people to service those clients. So if we take that employee idea out of the equation, then how does the business grow? And people started to ask about downloading our videos and using them in presentations. And what we discovered is that we had a business opportunity around offering digital downloads of our videos. And this really set off this whole chain of events where we started to think, oh, this is a model for us where we can remain small, remain home-based, make videos and build a library of them. And then that becomes our business, is offering videos in different forms for download, for embed, that sort of thing. And that has been the core of Common Craft's business ever since.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I like that, and at the end of the day, I always say to my entrepreneurs that you've got to define for yourself what success looks like, what it is that you want to accomplish. Some people may want a large corporation with, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 employees. Some persons just want to do what you're doing and, having time and at their hands to do other things other than concentrate solely on building a business, because life is about harmony. I won't say balance, because you never ever accomplish balance. It's about living in harmony.
I like that.
Yeah, you never can get balance. That's a good utopia.
Point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you really bring up a really great point, and it's a really big part of our perspective and big enough. I really think that it's time for people to think differently about success and respectability in business. I think for so long, the only value that really has mattered to a lot of people is the size of your bank account, or the size of your paycheck, or the size of your home, or how nice of a car you have. And that stuff matters. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but I think sometimes people are prone to outsource their values to other people, or to magazines, or to things they see on TV, and don't really understand what actually makes them happy and what makes them satisfied with their life. And I think that if people do have an opportunity to step back and think about what they actually value and where their happiness comes from, that they can find ways to orient their business to support those things. And that might not mean money. It might mean family. It might mean community. It might mean faith. It might mean independence. There's a long list of things that you can be rich with, and that your business can support, that I think is respectable, that it's something that people can feel like they are earning their success. It just takes a different form.
Interesting points, and just the right point on which we segue into. So what led you to write this book, Big Enough, Building a Business that Scales with Your Lifestyle?
Yeah, I've always felt that we were doing something interesting, and that it would never be something that you would see in a magazine because we're so small. But I felt that there was a lot of people out there who might be inspired by what we were doing, but it was all happening behind the scenes. And after doing it for 12 years and having the results, seeing that it was possible, we both thought that the timing was right to start sharing the things we were learning and hoping to be able to inspire people to think differently about their lives and to live life with intention. I think that's one of the real messages, is to be intentional about your decisions and not just go with the flow. And I like writing. That's another big thing. I love writing, and I want to write multiple books. And I thought that this subject would be something that would be a good fit for this time in history. And thankfully, it was written before the pandemic. But I'm very fortunate and happy that it actually has been bolstered by the pandemic. I think more people are thinking this way now.
Mm-hmm. And you perhaps alluded to it, but what are some of the things that you were learning, Lee?
What I'm learning right now?
What were some of the things that you were learning that you wanted to share?
Oh, I think it is that different definition of success for people is one thing. I think from a business perspective, I think there's lots of things in the book, but an example is about seeing that your business, for a lot of small business owners, that your business is tied to you personally, and that in a lot of cases, if your expenses are low and you're able to be financially responsible on the personal side, then it doesn't take that much for your business to support you. Like, your business doesn't have to be amazingly successful unless you have amazingly high expenses. So I think there's this balance between financial responsibility and living a life that maybe doesn't value keeping up with the Joneses, and then having a business that doesn't have to explode in order to support you. And that's kind of how we've always looked at Common Craft, is because we value our lifestyle, we value our quality of life, we're trading that for more income. Like, we could be making a lot more money had we made different decisions, but that's a trade-off we wanted to make. We chose to make that trade-off because we believe that quality of life is important to us. And I hope that that's a lesson that people can see, is that they have a choice.
And so you've talked about in your book, you're encouraging readers to think small. What does that mean, and why are you encouraging persons to think small when all along we've been told think big, accomplish this thing?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you saying, Lee?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that this is especially true during this pandemic era, that there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. And businesses who can deal with uncertainty are often the ones who are the most agile. They're the ones who can make decisions and adapt and pivot. And I think small businesses, and the ones that are especially, really small, can do just that, can see an opportunity and jump on it quickly. And I think that that's the thing that's going to define businesses as we go through this time of high uncertainty, is who can find the opportunities in all the madness. And I think being small and agile and being able to move quickly is an important part of that.
Mm-hmm. So as you talk about being small and agile, what advantage would you say that small businesses have over huge establishments, particularly in this time and as it relates to pivoting?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the case of big enough businesses, I think that small businesses don't often have a lot of, this sounds funny, a lot of accountability. Like, small businesses don't have a board of directors. They don't have necessarily advisors, and if there's no employees, then that makes it even different, where if you don't have that accountability, you are the master of your domain, and no one necessarily knows why you're making the business decisions you are. So that leads to this feeling of independence and control. And I think that's one of those things that that can lead to people to see, like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. I've been looking for this sense of independence. And that is a way for them to be able to make those decisions more quickly, where they don't have to think about their investors or their board. They can only think about what they want out of the business.
Right. And it's not to say that we're encouraging small businesses not to have a board of directors, not to have advisors, and not to have the necessary investors, requirements in place, because we know that will help you to scale as well and get opportunities, like, for example, grant funding or loans from the bank, whatever it is. So we're not in any way saying that those things are not necessary, but we're saying that small businesses have less hoops to jump over, and this decision making process is easier than it is for large corporations.
Yeah. I think that's an important point, Heneka. I am not here to say that there is anything wrong with entrepreneurs who think big, who hire, who have goals that include big companies. That is absolutely valid, and we need more of those people. My message is that for some people, often are choices that they might not realize.
Right. And we need to find out what works best for us and deal with that. Don't try to, as you alluded to, keep up with the Joneses. Yeah?
That's right.
All right. So as we are coming to the tail end of our conversation, Lee, I'd love for you to bring home some pointers, some tips. How do we build a business that will scale, but not only the business scaling, but scale alongside juxtaposition or lifestyle, without, I might add, the stress and unnecessary pain?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really boils down to living, and this is true in life, I think, too, is living with intention and staying true to your values, and to think about what values matter most to you and what and how your business can support those values. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a digital product. It could mean that you're consulting and that you're being hired to do things. But I think the real key is to think about the connection between the business and where your satisfaction comes from, and maybe how you could have a more satisfied life, or you could feel that satisfaction by having a business that supports more than just the bottom line.
And if I could ask you for your final thoughts, perhaps something that you were itching to say that I never asked you, what would that be?
Wow. Well, you can find the book at bigenough.life. I know we'll get to that.
Right.
That's a really great question. I think my other book is The Art of Explanation. And I think that I would encourage people to see that explanation, like their ability to communicate clearly, is a skill that they can develop. And if they've developed that skill, then they can have a competitive advantage.
Interesting point in which we close, and then you can share, as you talk about your book. We have been talking about it throughout the conversation. Big Enough, building a business that scales with your lifestyle. We'd love for you to share how we may find you, how we may find the book, as well as you did mention to me that you have a free chapter that you want to share with my community. So go right ahead and share all of that with us, Lee.
Happy to. The book is called Big Enough, and it can be found at the website bigenough.life. So it's the book's name followed by .life. And the home of my writing is my name, LeFever.com. And Common Craft is at commoncraft.com. And I'm one of those people who has very little competition online for my name. So you can find me at Lee LeFever on the major platforms.
Thank you so much, Lee LeFever. Certainly, this has been delightful speaking with you. Thank you for sharing time with me.
Oh, it was great to be here. Thanks so much.
And thank you, my peak performer, for tuning into this episode with Lee LeFever. Certainly, I look forward to connecting with you next week. It is always my joy, always my pleasure to bring you these amazing episodes with these amazing guests. Yeah, I know I say amazing a lot, but they're amazing for real. In the meantime, I want you to connect with me for all things podcasting, for books, coaching, online courses, whether you want a consultation or, just check me out as you've been doing. And if you're new, you can visit HenekaWatkis-Porter.com. Send me a message from the homepage and it will come directly to my phone. That's a WhatsApp message. I'll be happy to hear from you. Now, perhaps since I started recording again during the phase of the pandemic, I've been leaving these points of hope weekly, and I share them because it is what gives me joy and faith to hang on to, during these difficult times. It may not be something in terms of faith that you subscribe to, but I'm sharing just because it gives hope nonetheless, regardless of where you are at your faith journey. So this week's point of hope for you, it has been granted for Christ's sake, not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for His sake. Philippians 1 verse 29. For you it has been granted for Christ's sake, not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for His sake. Philippians 1 verse 29. Walk good.